The first thing my mother-in-law said when the police called was, "Well, she probably left the child alone on purpose. She's always been dramatic." My daughter was 7 years old. She was alone in a parking garage in Mississauga for 3 hours in February. It was -19 with the wind chill. And that was the first thing out of her mouth. I have replayed that phone call so many times that I know it by heart. The officer's voice was steady and careful, the way officers' voices always are when they're delivering information they know will break something inside you. He told me my daughter had been found by a maintenance worker near the elevator bay on level 2. She was sitting on the concrete floor with her knees pulled to her chest, wearing her light jacket, the purple one with the broken zipper I kept meaning to replace. She had been asking people passing by if they had a phone she could borrow. Most of them walked past her. One woman gave her a granola bar. I was 40 minutes away at the time, in a depositions meeting I couldn't walk out of without consequences I couldn't afford. My mother-in-law had offered to pick up my daughter from her after-school program. She had offered. I want to make that clear, because for a long time afterward, people in my husband's family had a way of telling the story that made it sound like I had imposed on her, like I had shown up at her door with a child in a carrier bag and demanded she deal with it. That is not what happened. She called me on a Tuesday evening, told me she would be near the school the following Thursday, said she didn't mind at all, said it would give her a chance to spend some time with her granddaughter. I said thank you. I believed her. My name is not important to this story. What is important is that I had spent the previous 6 years building a career in forensic accounting with a provincial regulatory body, that I was good at it, that I was the kind of person who documented everything, and that this habit, which my mother-in-law called paranoid and my husband called excessive, was about to become the most important thing about me. My daughter's name is Lena. She was named after my grandmother. She has her father's dark eyes and my stubborn streak and a laugh that sounds like it starts somewhere deep in her chest. When the officer brought her to me in the hospital waiting room, they had taken her in to check for frostbite on her fingers and her left ear. She ran to me and grabbed my coat with both hands and didn't say anything for a long time. She just held on. I held on too. I held on so hard my arms ached the next morning. The officer told me what had happened as gently as he could. My mother-in-law had picked Lena up at the correct time, from the correct school. So far so good. She had then taken Lena to a shopping center in Mississauga because she needed to return something at a home goods store. She had told Lena to wait for her in the parking garage while she ran inside. She said it would be 5 minutes. She was in the store for 2 hours and 47 minutes. When she came out, her car was on a different level than she remembered. She walked around for a bit, found the car, got in, and drove home. She forgot Lena was with her. That is the part that I have never been able to fully hold in my mind without something in me going very still and very cold. She forgot. She drove 40 minutes home, made herself a cup of tea, sat down with the television on, and did not think about my daughter once until the police called her, and even then her first words were about me. My husband, I will call him by what he was to me in those weeks, which was absent, did not come home that night. He was in Calgary for work. I called him from the hospital parking lot, standing in the dark with snow coming down, and my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I told him what had happened. I told him Lena was okay, that she had mild frostbite on 2 fingers and her ear but no permanent damage, that she was frightened and exhausted and asking for her stuffed elephant. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "My mother would never do something like that intentionally." I said, "I know." He said, "She's getting older. These things happen." I said, "She was alone for 3 hours. He said, I know that, but you know how my mother is, she gets flustered." I stood in that parking lot for a long time after we hung up. The snow kept coming down. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the 6 years I had spent learning how to fit inside his family, how to laugh at the right moments and let the wrong moments pass, how many times I had smiled through comments about my cooking and my career and my parenting that had teeth in them. I thought about all the times I had told myself it wasn't worth the conflict, that they meant well. That family is complicated. Lena was discharged the next morning. I took her home and put her on the couch with her elephant and a blanket and 3 episodes of her favorite show, and I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee gone cold, and I started writing everything down. I am a forensic accountant. I document things. It is what I do. I wrote down the timeline. I wrote down every phone call. I wrote down the names of the officers I had spoken to. I wrote down the name of the maintenance worker who had found Lena, because I wanted to send him something, and later I did. I wrote down everything my mother-in-law had said to the police, which the officer had relayed to me with a kind of careful neutrality that told me he had formed his own opinion about her. Then I called my supervisor. I did not call to take time off, though he offered it, and I eventually accepted a few days. I called because my supervisor had been practicing family law before he moved into regulatory compliance, and I trusted his judgment, and I needed someone to tell me clearly what my options were. He listened to everything. He was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they are thinking seriously and not just waiting for you to finish. Then he said, "You need to talk to a family lawyer today, not tomorrow. Today." I called one that afternoon. She was straightforward and didn't perform sympathy, which I appreciated. She told me that what had happened could constitute criminal negligence, causing bodily harm under the criminal code, that the threshold for that charge was not as high as people assumed, and that the fact that Litna had been taken to hospital with documented cold injuries was relevant. She told me to preserve everything. She told me not to discuss it with my husband's family. She told me to get a second medical opinion on Lena's injuries documented in writing. I did all of those things. My husband came home 2 days later. By then, his mother had called him 4 times and his sister had called him twice, and the story had been arranged into a shape I almost didn't recognize. In this version, my mother-in-law had made an honest mistake that anyone could make, and I was using it to attack the family. And Lena was fine, wasn't she? No permanent damage, so why was I making this into something it wasn't? He sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I need you to think about what you're doing here." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "I need you to think about what you just said to me." He said his mother was 71 years old and this would destroy her. He said the family was already stressed. He said I had never really made an effort to understand where his mother was coming from. He said a lot of things. I let him say them. I had learned in the years of our marriage that arguing before he was finished only lengthened the conversation. I waited. When he was done, I opened my laptop and showed him the photographs the hospital had taken of Lena's fingers. I showed him the medical report. I showed him the maintenance worker's written statement, which I had requested a copy of. I showed him the parking garage security footage timestamp, which showed exactly when Lena had been left and exactly when she had been found. He looked at all of it for a long time. Then he said, "This doesn't mean she should be charged." I said, "That's not my decision." He didn't understand what I meant by that. He found out 3 weeks later when his mother received a notice from the Crown Prosecutor's office. I had not filed the complaint directly. My lawyer had advised me on the process and I had followed it, and the investigating officers had made their own determination, and the Crown had made theirs. The charges were criminal negligence causing bodily harm. There was also a child welfare notification filed with the province, which meant that family services conducted their own assessment of the situation. My mother-in-law called me 17 times in the 48 hours after she received that notice. I did not answer. My sister-in-law sent me a text message that I will not reproduce here because it was the kind of message that says more about the person who sent it than anything I could add. My father-in-law, who has always been a quiet man who let his wife do the talking, showed up at my door on a Saturday morning. I opened the door and looked at him. He said, "This has to stop." I said, "Come in if you want to talk." He came in. I made coffee. He sat at my kitchen table, which is the same table where I had sat in the dark with my hands shaking, and he told me that I was tearing the family apart, that his wife was not sleeping, that the stress of this was affecting her health. He said Lena was fine. He said children were resilient. He said mistakes happen. I let him finish. Then I went to the other room and I came back with a folder. Inside it was a printout of the security footage timestamps, a copy of Lena's medical report, a copy of the maintenance worker's statement, a printed transcript of the call log showing how long it had taken my mother-in-law to remember my daughter existed after she arrived home. I put it on the table in front of him, and I sat down across from him and I said, "I understand you love your wife. I understand this is frightening. But I need you to look at what is in that folder and tell me that I should have done nothing." He looked at it. He didn't say anything for a long time. I watched something move through his face that I didn't have a name for. He picked up his coat and he left. My husband moved out 6 weeks later. Not because I asked him to, though I was close to it. He moved out because he told me he couldn't be in a house where I was doing what I was doing to his mother, and I told him that I wouldn't stop, and he left. I sat at the kitchen table after he drove away, and I felt the particular silence of a house that has rearranged itself around a departure. Lena was at school. The coffee maker clicked off. I thought about what it would have cost me to do nothing. I thought about Lena in that parking garage, asking strangers to borrow a phone. I picked up my laptop and I kept working. The legal process was slow in the way that legal processes are, measured in months rather than days, full of adjournments and paperwork and waiting. My lawyer was meticulous and direct. I appreciated her. I showed up to everything I was required to show up to, and I said what was true, and I let the process do what it was designed to do. During this time, I filed for separation. I had not planned to, exactly, or perhaps I had been planning to for a long time and simply hadn't admitted it to myself. I found a family lawyer who specialized in separation agreements and I started the conversation. My husband retained his own lawyer. The process was not friendly, but it was civil, which I had not fully expected, and I came to understand that civil was probably the best I was going to get. I want to say something about this period, because I think it gets left out of the kind of story I am telling, and its absence makes the story feel cleaner than it was. I was exhausted in a way I had never been. I was managing Lena's school, her therapy appointments. She had started seeing a child psychologist through our provincial health plan because she was having nightmares and didn't want to be left anywhere without me. My own job, the legal proceedings, the separation process, and the daily small humiliations of being the person in the family who had done something unforgivable by insisting that something had happened. My mother drove up from London for 2 weeks in March. She slept on my couch and made soup and took Lena to swimming lessons and did not offer her opinion unless I asked for it. I am not sure I have ever loved her more. My best friend, who has known me since we were both doing our undergraduate degrees at Western, and who has never once let a hard truth pass her by, told me during one of our Sunday calls that I was handling things with more grace than she would. I told her that wasn't saying much. She laughed, I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in what felt like a long time. The preliminary hearing was in April. I attended with my lawyer. My mother-in-law sat across the courtroom with her own legal counsel and did not look at me. My father-in-law sat beside her. My sister-in-law was there. My husband was not, and I did not ask why, and I did not feel anything particular about it one way or another, which told me something about where we had been for a while. After the hearing in the corridor, my sister-in-law approached me. She said, "I hope you're happy." I looked at her. She was wearing the expression that people wear when they believe they are delivering a devastating moral judgment. I said, "I hope Lena never has to wonder if her family will protect her. That's what I hope." She didn't have an answer for that. She walked away, I watched her go, and then I turned and walked in the other direction, back out into the April gray of a Toronto afternoon, and I breathed the cold air and I thought, I am not done yet. I was not done yet. There is a specific kind of discovery that happens in forensic accounting that people outside the field don't always understand. It is not dramatic in the way that television makes it look. It is slow and methodical, and it is built on the principle that money almost always tells the truth, even when people don't. I had been applying this principle to my personal life for years without fully realizing it. When my mother-in-law was charged, a separate civil matter emerged during the separation proceedings. My husband had been managing some of our shared finances in ways that required a closer look. I am not going to detail this extensively because some of it is still subject to legal process, but I will say that the skills I had spent 6 years developing at work turned out to be very useful at home, and that my husband's lawyer became significantly less relaxed as the proceedings continued. I did not feel satisfaction exactly. I felt something more like clarity. The difference between satisfaction and clarity is that satisfaction is about winning. Clarity is about finally seeing the shape of something that was always there. The sentencing hearing was in September. I sat in that courtroom on a Tuesday morning in a chair that was slightly too hard, and I listened to the judge speak in the measured cadence of someone who has spent decades choosing words with care. My mother-in-law was convicted on the criminal negligence charge. The sentence included a significant period of supervised probation, mandatory conditions around her contact with minors, and a fine. She did not receive a custodial sentence, which my lawyer had told me was the likely outcome and which I had made peace with. What she also received, by virtue of the conviction and the child welfare findings, was the permanent end of unsupervised contact with my daughter. That was what I had asked for. That was what I had needed. I looked at Lena that evening, sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, asking me how to spell responsible, and I thought about the parking garage and the purple jacket and the maintenance worker who gave her his own coat while they waited for the police. I had sent him a card and a gift card to a restaurant near the shopping center. He had sent back a brief handwritten note saying he was glad she was okay. I still have it. It is in the same folder as the security footage timestamps and the medical report. My divorce was finalized in November. My husband and I have a shared parenting arrangement that is mediated and documented and very clear on terms. Lena sees her father. She also sees a therapist. She is doing well in school. She told me recently that she wants to be a marine biologist when she grows up, which is different from last month's answer, which was astronaut, and different from the month before that, which was pastry chef. I told her she had time to decide. She said, "Mom, did you always know what you wanted to be?" I thought about that for a moment. I thought about the woman who drove home and forgot her granddaughter in a parking garage. I thought about the corridor outside the courthouse and my sister-in-law's expression. I thought about my father-in-law sitting at my kitchen table with the folder open in front of him, going quiet. I said, I knew what I didn't want to accept. That's where it started. She thought about this with the very serious expression she gets when she is working something out. Then she nodded, like I had said something that made sense, and went back to her homework. I watched her for a moment. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the first snow of the season was starting. Just a dusting, the kind that makes everything briefly very quiet. I went to the counter and poured myself a cup of tea and stood there watching the snow come down, and I thought, this is what it is supposed to feel like. Not victory. Not the end of something. Just the ordinary evening of a life I protected because someone had to. I was the one who had to, so I did.